are these people?
you know, um, but I do want to talk about this because you mentioned it, and we want to honor your time. It just means we'll have to have you on again for a longer conversation. But you are the editor-in-chief of the Burning Spear. Um, that population has been around since the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I said this in a previous stream and I think we've talked about Amazon Labor Union a little bit because, I think just as a network here, we're very much want to elevate labor. We want to elevate the stories of labor, especially right now, given what's happening in the world right now. But obviously, and you mentioned this, mainstream media is not going to cover the stories. I think mainstream media did cover your story a little bit, but it was misconstrued,
Right.
um, and then it just kind of went off in the ether or whatever. But you have a unique position to, as I say, control the narrative. Like you have a role where you're able to put out there what you want to put out there on your terms.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about that, in terms and how you use that in terms of your organizing. Because I think that's very important. And I think that's a conversation that people are not necessarily having, especially in independent media. We talk a lot about organizing, or we're kind of throwing the idea of organizing, but not necessarily get into the details of what that entails. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you are doing it. So can you share with us what that looks like for you in terms of, I think, one, following into that tradition, that history, but then on a larger scope, what does that mean for our community on a larger scale?
Yeah, we founded the Burning Spear, or Chairman Amali founded the Burning Spear. I say we, but that's just me assuming responsibility for the history. But in 1968 was when the Burning Spear newspaper was founded. And this was, the paper was founded at the same and being circulated at the same time that, Black political revolutionary journals were being circulated all throughout the country, and certainly even in, in various places throughout the world. You had the Black Panther newspaper, you had the Final Call, at this time. And in the mix of that was the Burning Spear newspaper. And we saw the strategic value of a news journal with the Garvey movement, the Negro World, and how it went all throughout the world. I mean, at a time they were sewing the newspaper into their coats and to get the paper to the people. So, the strategic value, and I think every revolutionary organization, has had to have a revolutionary political journal to be able to communicate with the people, the masses, to be able to communicate. And the basis of this being that, as you've mentioned, we have the colonial media, the bourgeois media, the media that works for them. And that's how we have to see it, because the first people that are out when a so-called crime has ever been committed, you have the police and you got the media. They're already there and they're working with their story straight. That's a collaborative effort, and so those things can't be separated. And the fact is that we have a social system and a superstructure founded on an economic base, right? So, and everything that comes from that superstructure, including the ideas itself. And you have to be able to control the ideas of that society, and to be able to define what it is, what the world is, and to be able to control that definition of the world. And you have all these different ways in which that happens. And we know most commonly like education and things like that. But the media also is that role. Mm-hmm. And from the TV to the music you listen to the day-to-day journalism, these are all instruments to be able to control, as we said, control the narrative. And this is their tool waging in the war of ideas. So they get to define everything. So when they attack us on July 29th, their news mill is already spinning, saying the reason why we are attacked is because the U.S. is attacking Russia in St. Louis, Missouri, in the Black community.
Right.
So this is what the media has already been able to put out. This is their story. So this is, how it is that they have to define it. And of course, because they have to drum up this mass hysteria, get people afraid of Russia, not afraid of what the US government is doing to them right now, today, but to get them afraid of some mysterious thing that Russia is doing over in Russia or something to that effect. So,
Right.
This is, their apparatus, and it, and the chairman, I think one of the quotes that really, really like struck me was that when we talk about journalism and objective and non-biased, there's no such thing. No such thing as non-biased journalism, that everything supports a worldview. You have a worldview. Even if you don't know how to define that worldview, you have one. The media has an interest in protecting a certain worldview, and it might protect a different sector even of that ruling class. But the point is, it protects and puts out a certain worldview. So the Burning Spear newspaper was going to put out the worldview and interests of the African working class. And it was going to say, we are biased on the side of the African working class. It was going to say that. And it was going to be the journal that explains who the African People's Socialist Party is. Here's our 14-point platform. This is our program. This is how we operate. This is what we believe. And we would distribute it out in our community as an organizing tool to be able to win people to this organization. And you can always determine the character of a revolutionary party by its political journal, whether or not it even has one.
Right.
You would be able to know in the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. So this has been a critical organizing weapon for our organization for the last 50 years. And especially before the age of social media, you would have people saying, I found you through the Burning Spear newspaper. I mean, countless stories of people, coming to us, finding us through the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. And so even with the rise of social media, we've continued to print the Burning Spear newspaper, even though they said that print is going out of style and things like that. But we found it necessary to continue printing, because when they talk about it's going out of style, they're not counting the Africans who don't have access to the internet on a regular basis and things like this. So we continue to print this journal as a fundamental organizing tool to bring the party to the people, to bring their organization to them, for them to see themselves in their own paper, to have their conditions defined to help them understand, but also for them to be able to express their grievances in the pages that they can't get in their local paper, that they can't tell to the New York Times because they're not going to publish it. We get it published right in the Burning Spear newspaper. So, but in, just in the broader sense, a whole war of ideas is happening. There's the military war with the guns, and then there is the ideas, capturing your imagination, your brain, your ability to think and how to think and to be able to see a future or not see a future. And so we're in the mix of that, and we're contending in that war of ideas, to capture the imaginations of the masses of people, to see and to understand the world for what it really is and not how it's been defined by the colonizer up to now.
Right.
So
I think it's almost poetic in the terms of you calling your work a journal, because I think it does two things. One, it kind of tells people like those, like the oppressive class who says you're this, you could say, no, we're this. And we have decades and decades and decades and decades of work to prove that to you, number one. But two, it serves, as you said, as an arm to reach the oppressed in our community in a way that is not being highlighted. So it's essentially a living document in terms of how your principles are being elevated in the space, which I think this is music to my ears. And I said this to you off screen. No, because I feel like this is the one thing that in terms of organization is lacking, that we're not talking about this part. Indy, who is our colleague and co-founder, he has said this, in terms of like we're using Amazon because I think they're one of the biggest labor movements right now. But this is one thing within the ALU that they're lacking right now is
among many movements.
Like in terms of having a face, like
more than one.
like versus the fact that you came on, like aligned with the chairman and then others within your organization coming in line, like that shows that solidarity within your movement that doesn't fall on one person. But I think just to kind of summarize you being here, this is a collective of people who are working for one thing that, yes, you're sharing the work, but I think more importantly, in terms of what you're doing as editor-in-chief, you are helping to kind of bridge that gap for people, that if something happens to you, that the work still exists within the community of which you created. So it's not really gone. Like it's still, and I think like we've seen this in politicians, like, or, many of these groups is it all falls in one person. And then like, if something happens to that person, the movement collapses. Whereas if you spread the wealth among several people, and then you're like, this really isn't for us. This isn't about me. This is about you. You leave it up to the community, and the community will have that archive in terms of your work. And so there wouldn't be necessarily like a rebuilding thing that we're kind of seeing now. It's like, we have this, we can kind of continue to work. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that's something that we're not talking about in terms of, we talk about organization all the time, but don't have any
example
basis as to what that should mean or what that should entail. So I really appreciate you kind of sharing that with our audience, like your role and how you're using that role literally like a spear, I think very appropriately named, to cut through the narrative, in terms of what you want people to share, but also what you want to kind of keep within the community that's rightfully theirs.
Speaking of our audience, if you could please tell our audience whatever you need to tell them, however much support you want them to give, where they can go to do that, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. And just really appreciate, again, the opportunity to be on this platform, to be able to talk to you and to all the people out there listening right now to this discussion. A couple of things. One, that in terms of, what makes this situation different, why we don't have to despair or be afraid of the attacks made against our movement. I mentioned, that we're on the right side of this question, and that this is just evidence of their weakness, that they don't come to impoverished Northside St. Louis and Southside St. Pete because they're strong. It's because they're weak. And they're in a very desperate position, vying for their place on the top. And I'm talking about the US government specifically, vying for their place as world hegemon. They're losing that grip on the whole world. This economy that was born and built off its slavery, colonialism, a colonial mode of production that defines, the whole world economy, that is coming undone. And so it's a desperate scramble for power and to keep this world locked in the old way. And the thing is, the majority of people on the planet are fighting for a new world. And the Uhuru movement has been, a center point in all of this in terms of fighting for that new world, ushering in that new world. And so that's why we're being attacked. That's the real crime that we've committed, because it's a hidden crime, but the crime that we've committed is fighting for Black people, is fighting for self-determination, is fighting for an end to oppression. And, everything that this system has created, that has created misery, humiliation, and pain for the people, the peoples of the world. That's our crime, because we have decided we will not, continue that fate for us anymore. And so we are in the process of have created not just a defense campaign, but a counter-offensive, because, we learned that they intend to indict, us, certainly, Chairman Amalia Shatella, and who they've characterized as unindicted co-conspirators, so they intend to pursue indictments. This fight is not over. However, we can make them really regret ever launching this assault on our party in the first place on July 29th, because they are going to have to speak through the work of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign, they're going to have to be able to speak to the murder of Martin Luther King, the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Fred Hampton, Bobby Hutton, the destruction of the Black Panther Party. They're going to have to speak to, you know, the centuries-long oppression, exploitation, colonization of Africa and African people. We're putting them on trial.
Right.
That's our objective. They want to put us on trial. We're going to put them on trial, and we're going to win because they cannot defend themselves against this. They said that because we charge the U.S. government with genocide, just like Paul Robeson, just like W.B. Du Bois, because we put genocide and U.S. government in the same sentence, they said that was a Russian plot, right? But the question remains, if Russia says it or African people say it ourselves, is genocide being committed against African people? That's the question. And the U.S. government cannot answer that question. So this is, you know, on us to build a movement both in the streets and build the campaign in the courtroom and on the streets. But the streets is where the struggle is concentrated. And so I'm calling on people listening today to support the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. Go to handsoffuhuru.org and learn all the information needed. Take the emergency response pledge, sign the Hands Off Uhuru petition. I want to say donations are extremely critical. This movement, this organization for 50 years, we have over 50 economic institutions in this movement. And some of the most dynamic work over the last couple of years has been what we've done in St. Louis with what's called the Black Power Blueprint. And they want to be able to drain this movement of its resources to take it away from these institutions that we've created for our people, which include, and it was said in the video, Quabbah Hall rental spaces for our community, commercial kitchens, radio stations, and also we just built a community basketball court. We're in the process of building a health center for African women in St. Louis. They want to take those resources from this movement so that they can go all to legal defense fees, because this is an expensive campaign.
Right.
We can't allow that to happen. So, you know, we're calling people to donate. Handsoffuhuru.org. The donate information is also on that website to send in the resources. This is how we fight back. This is how we don't have repeats of the Black Power movement of the 1960s. We can beat them. We will beat them.
Right.
And, you know, so I just want to reiterate again, handsoffuhuru.org. Is where you can, you know, learn information. And we have a mass meeting coming up on February 4th. And that's a good way to learn more information and just to, you know, be able to ask questions and things like that as well.
We'll make sure we'll plug that. And
I have your social media and the Burning Spear in the description, I think. If people want to find that, which you should be able to find your YouTube channel through all that and all that fun stuff. So people want to go check that out. But we appreciate you coming on.
This
great conversation.
Really has been a wonderful conversation, a necessary one. And, you know, like I'm basically charged because, you know, you speaking to the things that we've talked about on this show constantly. And it's great to have a young voice who's able to articulate a lot of what we've been saying in terms of what you're doing. So much respect to you, all blessings to you. Give our respect to the chairman and all your colleagues as well. And this just means we have to have you on again for more to unpack of what you said a little bit more. But we really appreciate you.
It's on the record. Count me in.
Oh no, we will. And anyone else you want to send our way, you know, we'll take it. So
on that note,
but thank you, Akilé.
Appreciate you so much. We're gonna go to card and then we're gonna be back with more stories. So hang in there, people. We'll be right back.